here's what I'll present, I guess, in defense of Joey Logano. I'll say that there are 5 drivers in the Cup Series this year that have multiple wins. They all have at least 3. 4 of those guys are in the championship 4. The guy with 6 wins, Kyle Larson, just talked about throwing it away at Homestead. The other guy, Denny Hamlin, was kind of really just hot in the spring when the Fords were missing. And then, I mean, he talked about it. He's surprised he made it as deep in the playoffs as they did. So, I mean, I guess he doesn't have, and then, okay, next step here. I mean, if you give the Richmond win that Austin Dillon, although he won that race, he didn't get the playoff qualification from it. So if that win ends up going to Logano, then he actually has the most wins of the championship 4. But that's playing what if scenarios. That's not a good defense here. But I mean, we've been in this format for a decade. We've been in the playoff point format for 8 years. Everyone knows how this works. I just simply play the game. If you're Kyle Larson at Homestead, make the move differently. Why are you, don't worry about I don't really know what to say anymore at this point. Like, the format's the format. Everyone knows what it is. Go out there and perform. If you're really the best driver, then it should be easy to move on, right? Like, it shouldn't matter. So I don't know. People, you put weight in top tens, but like wins, W's, the W, finishing first place in the race. That's what pays out at the end of the day on the individual race day, and then the season as a whole. I've been in this era for a while. It is what it is. I don't know. I'm not a huge playoff. I guess I'm not like a big playoff supporter, encouragement, but I will at least defend it while it's the format at hand.
Yesterday, during the State of the Sport, Steve Phelps said all the drivers know the rule going into the season. I feel like everybody knows the rules. There are key moments. A win is more important. Winning at the playoffs is much more important than a win at, say, New Hampshire. Granted, still, that win in New Hampshire could be the difference between the playoff points advancing to the next round or the regular season championship. So going out there and just getting the win, even if it's fuel strategy, I think that was brilliant what he did with the fuel strategy game.
Yeah. And you can't equate, a 9th place finish, a top 10 finish at Dover is not the same thing as a top 10 finish with stage points in an elimination race at Martinsville. You can't, if you look at the list of stats, it's gonna the top 10 at Dover, but the top 10 in Martinsville elimination race. Those are 2 very different top 10s, but they get looked at the same way on the stat sheet. It's really easy to look at those as, they're both 9th place finishes, but what people are racing for in each race is so important. And it's just everyone's racing a different race every day, all the way throughout the season, and that's what makes this format interesting. And when you look at it from that lens, and not just this, the stat sheets, when you actually look at the race, I think that makes it a lot more interesting.
It does. It makes the racing interesting. And then the other thing too, I feel with this format, I really feel like we don't have an illegitimate champion yet. I mean, everybody, I feel, has been deserving in some way or other. Mm-hmm. And, a playoff run, while some people say, well, the regular season, they didn't do anything. But they did in the playoffs. They moved the rules.
And even in 2024, you can't even in the next particular. I mean, first of all, the playoff. If we were still in the 2014 to 2016 version of this, I would agree with a lot of the points being made. But the playoff points, the regular season bonus, the next gen era, and the wins, these have all since negated a lot of those complaints that would have been a lot more valid in 2014 to 2016. Your regular season performance does matter. The win at Dover would matter a lot more than the top 10 at Dover. And it's hard. You can't stumble your way into the championship 4. That's just not possible. Alone, the way it looks is you basically have 3 winners from the round of 8 races, and then the top guy on points, which if you're going to point your way into the championship 4, you're already going against, I guess I won't declare them the 8 best, but 8 of the best. And you're beating them over this 3-race sprint, along with your playoff points from the regular season. It's really hard to end up with, an unworthy champion. It takes a lot to get all the way to this point. And also on top of that, the playoffs are they're more than a quarter of the season. This 10 race stretch is more than a quarter of the season. So if you're performing well in the playoffs, that's still as if you performed really well over the summer or in the spring. Like it's a whole chunk of the season. So it's just there are some arguments to be made, I guess, over the playoff format, but a lot of them just seem to have some like solutions or rebuttals that I don't know. I guess I find pretty obvious or pretty clear.
Yeah, this format, I think it has some a little bit of the not so great side with what happened in Martinsville, but the move we saw from Todd Reddick at Homestead, what a moment! Right. Of course, the Hail Mary, a lot of people remember that. Even I think people forget about some of the valiant efforts that didn't exactly turn out successful. Clint Bowyer at the Roval with no power steering and how exhausted he looked outside of his car. Is like, this really brings it all out. And of course, we got comments in the chat room. Ben Schneider, there are no illegitimate champions. Even Kyle Busch in 2015 can't be blamed by NASCAR giving him a waiver. It was absolutely unfair to blame the drivers. But that's not going to stop me from criticism of the system itself. We're not a stick and ball sport. I don't think we should compare ourselves to. I think he has some good points. It's not exactly a perfect system as well. I think last week was a good example of it.
Yeah, I think I'm sure Ben and I'm sure we have very different views on this format. I'm sure we could have a 3-hour special talking about it. But I think, the one thing, the Kyle Busch 2015 stands out to me. And I think that's kind of a scenario where like playoff points would have obviously, played a role and, hurt those chances a little bit. But, there's still some impressive element to Kyle Busch coming back, getting the wins, getting in the top 30, and then still showing up after, a big chunk out of the season. Not that, like I said, I don't love the 2014 to 2016 version, but on that, I think the one thing that I would present is I don't love the championship race just being like the best finisher of the four. If there's some way to there's got to be an extra element to kind of decide this last piece. I would love if there was like the playoff points still mattering somehow, or the stage points and the playoff points adding up somehow. I'd like to see some way for that to get combined, or even if it would change the schedule. You'd have to change the structure, but a 3-race final round, I guess is also kind of in that same line of thought.